welcome back to the Sawyer Viola show. My next guest today is Victor Cummings. How's it going today?
Hi, Sawyer. Thanks for having me on your show. This is really great.
You're
We've known each
welcome.
other. We've known each other a long time,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's
Question
fun to be.
one. What were you doing before transition? How did you find out about it?
Well, I've kind of been at it for about as long as there's been, transition in the public schools because I had been working in Seattle when I was in my 20s. I was working with people who were being brought out of the institutions where a lot of people with disabilities used to live in
Mhm.
these sort of hospital-like institutions. I was living up in Seattle, and so as a society, we had figured out that that wasn't fair, and it wasn't a good place for people to have to live, especially when it's your only choice. And so there was a movement of bringing people out of these, and these were adults primarily coming out of these institutions where hundreds of people might live, and they had sheltered work, and they got care, but they also were kind of basically incarcerated in a hospital type environment, and that was the only place they had to live. So I was really interested in this movement for community integration and teaching people how to live and work in the community. And so I had been doing that up in Seattle in the 1980s, the late 1980s, and then the law that was passed, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, was passed and signed into law in 1990. I was just moving to Portland, and so that created this field that we call transition, because special education used to just be for like kind of preschool through the end of high school.
Mhm.
And in 1990, that IDEA law extended and expanded special education from birth through age 21. And so they added in 1990, early intervention services were added, so students could, children, infants and children, young toddlers even, could start accessing some special education services and supports while they were learning to learn. And then also at the other end of the spectrum, 18 to 21 year olds, we realized that people need some extra support in between that high school graduation and young adulthood, with employment and community living skills and things like that. So I stepped into that right as that law was being passed, and so I had already been doing this kind of work with older adults.
Mhm.
And so when I had an opportunity to work with younger adults, like 18 to 21, I was really excited because I knew that that was a period of time, that 18 to 21-year-old, age span is a time when a lot of growth and development can happen. And especially for young adults with disabilities who haven't maybe had a chance to be out in the community as much as other people, and learning how to navigate the public transit system, learning how to navigate employment, college, all the kinds of things that adults do. So I was really excited to be in transition, and the timing was great for me. The laws came into place, the funding to support it came into place just as I was kind of starting my career in special education. So I worked in transition my whole career.
Nice, nice. So how did you, and thank you so much for everything you did. That's so inspiring. So
Oh,
question so
you're very
question
welcome.
two, how did your amazing work was your work in transition and special education that led you to CCS program? Were you one of the people who started the PSU program?
Yeah, I was again, I was well, my timing and my position was really well placed because I had actually had a transition. I was a transition teacher at Portland State University, where of course the CCS program started. It started as that as a 5-year grant called Think College, and yes, I was part of there was a group of people, there was about 30 people from PSU, a couple of people from PPS, Portland Public Schools, and the Developmental Disabilities Program, Vocational Rehabilitation, Disability Rights Oregon. There was a whole, and parents, young adults, there was a whole group of people that kind of had a visioning process where we had several meetings at Portland State University where we would talk about, what could this program look like? What would the challenges be? What would the supports look like? How are we going to fund it? A to Z, how do we get accreditation? All this stuff had to be figured out. And so we worked for several years during that time, kind of building and developing the program. I wasn't working for the program, and I was still working for Portland Public Schools. And so I was more like a friend, kind of a friend of the program, an advocate. But then after the program was in place, I was very active in helping inform Portland Schools transition students. We had about 160 students in 18 to 21-year-old students in transition, and yourself being one of those, and being because I was involved in this project, which became CCS, for a university experience for people with disabilities. I was in a good position to let my team know, my 160 PPS students who were in transition, and a few of those, a number of those students did continue and join the Think College program, and then later, when it became CCS, the Career and Community Studies program. I would help to students with the application process, help them get their documentation together, practice for the interview, for the admissions interview, and then once students were in the program, I also provided some additional transition support through my job through Portland Schools, working as a transition specialist at that time. And I would help with the linkage and the interagency connections to VR and some of the other programs, college disability services. We worked together to support students who were in the CCS program. Even things like at the first we would provide bus passes. They could use their school bus pass to commute to CCS. We would do travel training to teach people how to, the route from home to PSU if they didn't already know it. And so there was a lot of things that we kind of worked collaboratively for a number of years between, Portland Public Schools, special education, the transition program at PPS. We provided most of the students who were in the CCS program at PSU either had been or were currently students in the transition program. So students would often be what we called co-enrolled. They would be in both programs at the same time for a couple of years, and then when they aged out and graduated from the Portland Schools transition program, they would often continue on for a couple more years in the CCS program until they graduated. Some students would wait until they had completed their transition program and then went to the Portland State program after they had completed their transition program through PPS. So they'd give them a few more extra years of college time after they had graduated from the transition program. So there's a lot of overlap, a lot of collaboration and advocacy that went on between Portland Public Schools, through myself, and also we had, we would provide things like speech language therapy, occupational therapy, some vocational transition support. There was a number of different things that we could provide through the PPS program if students were still enrolled and still of age. Sorry, these are long answers to short questions.
No worries, y'all good, y'all good. The more familiar. What's your core role now with CCS and the PSU program?
Well, now I'm just back to kind of being a friend of the program. After I retired from Portland Public Schools, I did come and work for a full academic year with CCS. It was the school year of 2023 to 24, if I'm remembering correctly. I was the academic coordinator for CCS, which was a new role for me. with the program. I was the one that would work with the student and the professors and the CCS team, and we would write the individualized syllabus for each student, based on what work that they determined, the academic work that was a good fit for them. So we'd come up with a customized, individualized syllabus detailing what each individual student would be responsible for completing within whatever academic class they were taking. And these are particularly for the academic classes. Like, we didn't do an individualized syllabus for things like maybe choir, or like a PE class, or some of the other activities and classes that students might take. But we would modify as needed that kind of core academic class that the students took. And that was my job. Each term we would create a new set of syllabi for the students, and then I would be a support both for the CCS student with kind of managing their modified syllabus requirements, accessing the academic coaches that we had within our program that we partnered with this Portland State graduate students provided academic coaching, and I would also provide training and some supervision and some a lot of materials. If materials need to be modified, I would either teach them how to do that, or I would provide it for the coach and the student team. And so there was a lot of ongoing support that went with the students being in those academic classes, and receiving other supports throughout the program.
Nice, nice. So how do we keep, I guess question four kind of ties into this, but how do we keep sort of the court program going? Like, what, in your opinion, needs to happen in order to keep the program sort of moving forward and successful?
Yeah. Well, my understanding, and I haven't been really deep in the weeds on the actual funding. That's been more, through
Mhm.
the program director of CCS, and in some cases the dean of the College of Education at Portland State. Um, I have been part of many conversations, and there's been many things tried to get um, long-term stable funding, because
Mhm.
after the Think College grant ended after the first 5 years, then PSU had to adopt the program and fund it to whatever level was possible within the other competing budgets at the university. And so my understanding is that because the program serves a relatively low number of students, um, and relative to the cost of the program, that the program is in this what they call sunset. They're kind of phasing the program out because of not enough long-term stable funding. So we've tried a lot of things, like partnering with the developmental disabilities program through Multnomah County, through vocational rehabilitation, accessing various funding sources that can help provide some of the supports and services that students need in the CCS program. Also making use, like I mentioned, of the graduate students who receive academic credit for doing academic coaching with the CCS students. So that's a way of saving money. So, but there's still a kind of a core level of funding. Part of the director's, a good part of the director's salary um, comes from the College of Education program. The academic coordinator, that job that I did, which was designed as a full-time job, and when the program is fully enrolled with, we've had up to close to 20 students in the program. Right now there's only, I think, 5 students, because they're not admitting new students because of the sunset situation, and they're down to about 5 students that are basically kind of finishing out their last 2 years. It might be a few more. There's a few more students who are going to graduate at the end of this year, and then it'll be down to about 5 students. I think there's maybe 7 or 8 students right now. But so right now it could be handled as a as a half-time position for the academic coordinator. But when it gets back up to 20 students, you really need to have a full-time coordinator because it's a lot of work. A lot of time goes into negotiating all of those syllabi and providing the supports. And so we need, in terms of funding, we need, we need the director's salary to be paid. We need an academic coordinator salary. And in the past, we've also had at least some kind of um, uh, uh, additional support, providing advising, some, kind of academic advising for the students. And so right now, there's just not the funding for those positions allocated the way, because PSU is having some budget problems, crises even maybe, and so they have to decide where their money is going to go. And people who make those budget decisions have determined right now that there's, it's kind of a catch-22, because there's not enough money to admit new students. Our numbers have gone down, and now because our numbers are so low, it doesn't really justify more staffing. So it's like, you know what I mean, that catch-22,
Yeah.
you can't get there from here. And so that's the problem, is where is the money going to come from? And we've gone to the legislature because ultimately that is who funds PSU. The university gets its funding from the
Yep.
legislature, and this is just one of many programs that all are competing for basically similar or the same pots of money. And so we're in a kind of a tough spot right now because of attrition and the pressure on our funding. We have a very small, just a bare bones kind of staffing, and just kind of a bare bones amount of students in the program, just kind of writing it out to see what happens. But because it's so low, it makes it even harder to make that case to the legislature that they should fully fund the program, because it's now gotten so small. So it's kind of almost like a self-fulfilling
Yep.
prophecy that it just gets smaller till it goes away. But that doesn't have to be the case. Minds could change, money could be found, money could be reallocated,
Mhm.
but the political will to make this a priority, and then to be able to find some emergency source of money to keep it going until more long-term funding can be developed, and even possibly some additional student fees might have to be charged, in order to a program fee that would be basically costs on top of the student's tuition, which isn't very fair. That some programs would have higher program fees, but sometimes in order to get the to keep a program in place at all, sometimes special fees have to be assessed in order to keep the program alive.
Yep, yep. So kind of as a follow-up question, that you said earlier, is there a way to build somebody's like sort of like team or essentially like help them get providers and stuff so they can have it outside when they leave the program, or no?
Let me make sure I'm understanding exactly where you're going with this. So you're talking about after students exit and
Hmm.
graduate from the CCS program, kind of like ongoing supports.
Hmm.
My understanding, in my experience, is that once students leave the university program, um, basically what they still have access to are their adult services,
Hmm.
like their developmental disabilities, the county DD program, which provides the
Yeah.
Medicaid funded supports, like for brokerage or county case management services, as well as some providers. Also, and that's a long-term support. And then there's short-term supports like vocational rehabilitation that can help you with finding a job or keeping a job. But it typically, VR is kind of a short term, 6 months to a year. And then if you need long-term support vocationally, then that would come also from your county DD supports. That's where that funding comes from for long-term support. Like if you just need maybe some check-in coaching or some follow-along coaching or some like kind of emergency type coaching, if you get some new job tasks, or
Hmm.
you're get a new manager and they don't understand maybe your strategies and supports and stuff. So and then beyond that, it gets, in terms of supports and services, it gets pretty thin. Um, you know, uh, there are some advocacy supports, like Disability Rights Oregon. If you had some particular advocacy situation, you can get some low or no cost advocacy depending on your resources. People can also private pay, providers to do certain supports and services if you need it. There's also some people access money management services, where they have a designated payee for either their, maybe their Social Security or maybe even their wages, and then that money management service can support them with managing their finances if they're not able to do it independently by themselves or with their family support.
Nice,
Not
nice.
not everybody has that, so sometimes people will access money management, and there's usually a fee that goes along with that. They take a small percentage of your income in
Yeah.
order to help you manage your money.
Nice,
But that's
nice.
I don't know if I missed your question, or if that is
You're all
that kind
good,
of
you're all
what you.
good, you're all good. So I guess one more question. How does the PSU program, how do you guys help, like, okay, we're trying to get people like into jobs and stuff. How, I guess.
Like for jobs that would be sort of like career type jobs
Yeah.
after they leave the program. Well, there's, as you may recall, there's kind of a process of, you're working, part of your CCS program is working, having paid employment as part of your experience.
Hmm.
Usually people are working on campus, like you did. And then the support, you know, CCS and the student and the team are working with VR the whole time. There's kind of for the CCS students, they have kind of an extended um, VR eligibility, where in my experience, people maintained VR, active VR support throughout their 4-year CCS program, so that they could get ongoing support with that job piece, and that people in the CCS students in their last year are really focusing on what's next, and working with vocational rehabilitation to, identify, a good job fit, support with, getting ready for interviews, application, getting initial job coaching, and getting any supports or accommodations are needed on the job. So it's primarily, the vocational piece is paid for through the students, the adult students, vocational rehabilitation eligibility, and that is an ongoing, lifelong support that's available for VR, is always available. But like I was explaining, and as I think you understand, VR will coach you and help you get to work, learn the job, provide some ongoing coaching for a while. But then at a certain point, they'll say, okay, you're a job, you're stable, we're going to close your file. And if you need additional support, that would come from your DD funding for that ongoing support. But then if you lose your job or something big happens, VR, you can always go back to VR. They can reopen your file and put you back into plan and start providing more intensive services until, again, you get stabilized in your job enough that you don't need that level of service. And then you can kind of go back to that long-term job support, which is a little bit more like, for most people, it looks like kind of check-ins and some occasional coaching, but it's less intensive than that. When you're first getting a job and getting up to speed on all the new job stuff. Um, so did that kind of answer what you
Yes,
were
yes,
looking for?
yes. Thank you so much today, Victor, for your time and everything. And I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Yeah, I did. And there's just one other thing I wanted to add, sorry, if I could, was this piece about, this is something that I really got to see when I was working as the academic coordinator
Hmm.
for that school year, 23-24. Um, one of the things I really have always loved about career and community studies program at Portland State is that it I feel like it's like the next level of
Hmm.
where special education should end up for people who want that university experience. And so I was always excited about, for the students
Hmm.
to be able to have that university experience. what I also got to see when I was in that job doing the academic coordinating, writing those modified syllabi, spending a lot of time talking to the professors, occasionally going into the classroom with the student, maybe doing a little presentation about, here's what my supports are, here's what my strengths are, here's how I can participate in team projects, etc. And meeting some of the other PSU students that our CCS students were in class with, I got to hear from the professors and also sometimes from the other PSU students how exciting it was for them to be part of this project and how much they were learning about what it's like to have more diversity in the classroom. Many of these professors had never had a student who had what's considered a developmental disability, because in the past, without this program, students were not eligible to go and be in these classes. And so the professors got to see that in some cases with just a little bit of modification, and in a few cases no modification at all, in a few cases for students who were like maybe third or fourth year CCS students who really kind of knew how to be a college student, a university student, or in some cases students needed a lot of support and it had a very limited number of things on their syllabus that they were responsible for. But no matter what the level that the student was able to participate academically, the benefits, socially and for the learning community, again and again and again, I just heard from professors and from other PSU students, thank you. This is like amazing. I will never forget this experience. In the future, these young PSU students, they're eventually going to be managers someday, maybe bosses. They're going to be in positions to where they can open doors for people with disabilities and to be able to see the potential. And so I just felt like we were really changing the world and changing the future by creating this successful experience and this successful model for how it can work and be a win-win for everybody. And I think that that's something that, the legislature has had a chance to hear a lot from students about how important this has been for me, as a, CCS student, doing this university program, how much it's meant to me and my life and my family. But I also think that they need to hear how
Yeah.
important it is for the professors and the other PSU students. It's like I say, it's a win-win-win. Everybody wins in this. And so that's where, I'm hoping that message can somehow get out and maybe, help inspire people to, really revisit the importance of that funding and what we get for that funding.
Nice, nice. Yeah, thank you. That's so cool. And maybe I'll try to reach out to my professors, see if they would be, maybe I should, yeah, I'm gonna talk to the group about that. But you have a great point. Thank you so
Yeah,
much today, Victor.
you're very welcome. And thank you for your advocacy. It's really just responsible and kind of you to take this interest and still be working to
Yep.
kind of advocate for this program that meant a lot to you, and I know that you would like to have that be there for future students so that other people can benefit from all this work that was done to build this program and all that we've learned, and just to be able to have more people have that successful experience at university.
Nice, nice.
Thanks for your invitation. Thanks
You're
for having
welcome.
me on. Okay, bye bye, Sawyer.
Bye.